one of the things I wanted to bring up to you that you might not know about Charlie, because I think we would look at Charlie Kirk and say, he's one of us. Like he's in the movement. He's working towards the same types of freedoms that we're all sort of looking for. He's one of us. What you might not know is he's one of you. Like fundamentally, he's one of you. He was a person who was a listener to the radio show. He was a person who listened to the same types of stuff that we talked about on a day-to-day basis. And unlike so many of us, including myself, he actually did something about it. He really kind of changed the world. And of course, this is the reason he was targeted in Utah yesterday. And I wasn't sure how much you knew about that story, honestly. And I wanted to bring on Glenn Beck. He is, of course, host of the Glenn Beck program right here on BlazeTV. Glenn, dealing with this over the past 24 hours has been really, really tough for a bunch of different reasons. But maybe selfishly, I keep coming back to the thought of Charlie Kirk, a listener, a person who was in our audience, who listened to you on a day-to-day basis and all the things that you talked about. I know you discussed this with him. Can you kind of just give us that perspective a little bit?
I said to my wife last night, I've always thought it was amazing. And I've always worn that as a badge of honor internally to know that, he told me, he said, I used to listen to you every day. And you helped shape me and I knew what I wanted to do because I was watching and listening to you. And I always thought it was a good thing. And it is. But today, and yesterday, I kind of wish he wasn't listening. But that is so selfish, because what he did was he changed so many lives. He was the guy, when he was talking in an interview with me about, I saw you on the steps of Lincoln Memorial. He was exactly the guy I was talking about when I said, right now there is a future George Washington, a future Abraham Lincoln, a future patriot that is hearing my words right now, and he will stand up and he will change the world. And he might only be, 8 or 10 years old. And that is about how old Charlie was when he heard those words. And I am convinced he would have become a president of the United States and most likely a very, very good president of the United States.
That was one of the things that was really interesting about Charlie, watching him from an outsider perspective. I didn't know. By the way, this is a tweet Charlie Kirk sent the date is October 13th, 2011, which is, right in the middle of the, the Tea Party era and the Obama era. He says, at Glenn Beck, I'm 17, a high school student. I listen to you every day. I speak for local tea parties about debt and deficit, fight liberal bias. This is how long this goes back. And, you watched, it was so fascinating to watch because I witnessed the sort of rise of Charlie Kirk from a distance. Like we had him on a few times and we were certainly aware of him and the important stuff that he was doing. But, I saw a bunch of clips of him debating people at colleges and, posting stuff online. And what I was fascinated about when we actually were able to meet him and he came in and he spoke at length with us was the incredible depth he had. He almost came off on social media as this guy who was mixing it up at colleges, but when you talk to him in person, he came off like a professor. Like he was well read.
Brilliant man. Very brilliant.
What was your first impression when you actually met him?
my first impression was this is a dynamic young man. Because he grew a lot. I met him when he was 17. And he grew in faith. He grew in his knowledge. He was very impressive from the beginning, but watching him grow and change, his faith changed him. My son told me we were at a big charity fundraiser in, I think, Miami, and the fundraisers asked if I would come up to the suite and meet before the fundraiser started, and they said we're just having a couple people up, and my son went before I did, and he was waiting for me because I was delayed by something. I don't remember what. But he was sitting next to Charlie Kirk on the couch, and my son at the time, 16, maybe 15, 16, and a huge Charlie Kirk fan. My daughter voted for Trump because of Charlie Kirk, not because of me. He was sitting next to him, and Charlie was very gracious. But he said he just sat there and he listened to everybody. He told me last night. He said, I watched him, Dad, and he just sat there like this. He was staring ahead, and he was listening. He said, and then you walked in. And he said, it's like he lit up, and he turned around and looked at you, and a big smile came on his face. And I said, hey, Charlie, how are you? And we started talking. And the conversation turned to some difficult conversations, some difficult things in the room. And I was watching Charlie, and he was watching me. And I said, hey, Charlie, can you and I just talk for a minute? And we went out onto this balcony of this hotel. It was overlooking the Atlantic. And he asked me, he said, this is summer of 18, maybe, right before the riots. And he said, what's coming, Glenn? What's coming next? And I said, Charlie, you know history well enough. I said, you know what comes next. The only thing left in this cycle is assassinations. And he said, I hope not. And I said, they're coming, Charlie. And they're going to come for somebody, could be one of us. And I said, when that happens, we really have to have an understanding, because we're going to come through some really difficult times. And no matter what happens, you and I have to be tied to God and his principles and the Constitution. And he said, I'm already there. And I said, good, I am too. And I said, and if it happens, we need to lead the country into those principles and faith and love and compassion. And we went on and had some more weird, terrifying, now especially, conversations. And he looked at me right before we ended, because we both ended, and we just stood looking at the ocean, quiet after a while. And he leaned over to me and he said, this is so bizarre. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, to have this conversation with you and to know that this is true, it's like we're living in a movie. I said, I know. I had no idea at that time that that conversation would end up being so important, at least to me, and prophetic for him.
You had not only a connection to Charlie and probably tons of people who were at the event yesterday, given you've talked at Turning Point events over the years, and this is somewhat close to, where you are right now. But your daughter was there. Cheyenne was there at the event as all of this happened. I know you talked to her since. You've seen her. She's okay.
Yeah. It took her several hours to get out of there. And to get to safety and to get to us. But she finally arrived last night about, almost been 8 o'clock last night. And, I just held on to her. And I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "It's just weird, Dad. Somebody was killed right in front of me today." And I said, "I know." And then I asked a really hard question. I hoped what the answer was. And I said, "Did you actually see it, honey?" And she said, "No." Because she was 10 feet from the tent. And she said, "No." She said, "I just happened to hear a bunch of people screaming behind me." And she said it was like a bunch of liberals that were just screaming things. And she said, "I turned around to look like, what is wrong with people?" And she said, "I turned around and I'm watching them. And then I hear what I thought was a firecracker." And she said, then everybody starts screaming, and I turn around back towards the stage, and I'm immediately pushed down. And she said, so I didn't see anything. That was probably the hardest thing for me to get my arms around yesterday, was the thought that my daughter was at a shooting, and she was that close. The innocence that had been taken from my sweet little girl by the shooter yesterday was difficult. But then to think all day that she might have seen in person what I saw on videotape, I thought she'll never recover from that. She's such a sensitive young girl that she'll never recover from that. And I thank God she didn't see it.
Before you go, Glenn, we were talking about watching the things that's hit me the most watching all of this is, there's this one video that everyone keeps posting of his little daughter running to him behind the scenes at Fox News, and it's just absolutely crushing to watch this adorable little girl running towards her dad. And people kept posting these wonderful pictures of the family, and after a while, I kept noticing, I never really learned what the kids looked like because of every photo, their faces weren't shown. And I know this from watching your security situation over the years, that's a choice that a lot of people have to make because they're being threatened all the time and they don't want to show the picture of their kids, so they're not seen. This is one that hit me maybe most obviously, is of this picture of their beautiful family, and one kid is facing the other way, the other one has the hat pulled awkwardly over her face because they don't want to show the identity. And I think I don't know if people understand the types of things that someone like you go through and Charlie goes through when it's more than just dealing with the media or dealing with politics. Like, this is something that's over your head all the time. And as someone who's seen you go through it over and over again, thank you for thank you for that sacrifice for everybody. It's been hard on you, man. I don't know. I just wanted to say that. I don't have a question.
You're a good man, Stu, and I have been proud and honored to have you by my side this whole journey. And I love you.
I love you too.
I love you very much.
I love you too.